There are certain people in life that you do not want to cross. That list may be different for every single person, but I would imagine one person on the top of that list is Giancarlo Esposito. And holy cow, there's no more proof of that than Far Cry 6, Ubisoft's latest title in the Far Cry series. With it comes obviously a brand new villain, which is what the series is known for, but also a ton of accessibility. So, what did I think of it? Let's find out. Before we begin this video, I want to encourage you to hit that subscribe button so you can be able to see when new videos come out. That would really help me in this channel. I do a bunch of accessibility reviews and previews and a bunch of other fun stuff. Hi, I'm Steve Saylor, I'm blind, and if you're wondering how I'm able to play video games if I'm blind, if you take a look at the video here and the video's not there, click the link in the description down below to see exactly what I see when I'm playing video games. So before I begin this review of Far Cry 6, I do want to be able to touch on that, yes, I did some accessibility playtesting for this, so just to be forewarned that, yes, even though I did work on it, this is as unbiased as a review as I can be able to get when it comes to the accessibility of Far Cry 6. So first off, let's talk about some general thoughts of Far Cry 6 in regards to story and the gameplay. If you played the Far Cry series in the past, you obviously know the mechanic of what makes a Far Cry game, and that comes down to the villain. Well, Giancarlo Esposito is kind of the biggest name in this game by playing El Presidente Anton Castillo. I apologize for butchering the language. I'm so sorry. I'm just terrible at it. But the attention is there at least. But anyway, Giancarlo like really gets into this role, and I mean, like, as much as we love the villains of Far Cry past, like Vaz or even Joseph Seed, essentially, like, this is going to be put into the annals of one of the kind of the great antagonists, not only just in the Far Cry series, but just in video games in general. The fact that we have this kind of really great actor who loves to be able to just jump into a villain role and just does them so well, like, you really are and like just enamored with his performance. Anytime that he's on screen, essentially he steals and chews up the scenery every single time, and you really kind of like get to see that fleshed out in this game, actually more so than I probably think in any other acting performance that he's done, because in the game you have a lot of hours where you basically are just bombarded with everything about Anton Castillo, everything from not only just seeing cutscenes from not even from your own player's perspective, but just the cutscenes for the story in general, but then hearing him everywhere when it comes to radio broadcasts or TV broadcasts. Like, he is so ever present on the island of Yara that it is just it's like a cloud of just like fear and just you are like anywhere you turn, you never know if he's going to show up, and that is how big this performance is in the game. And I honestly think if you really love Giancarlo Esposito as an actor, he is definitely going to be a very big presence in this game. Now, if you're wondering in regards to sort of the Latino representation in this game, based on his performance, because he is half Italian and half black, I would definitely recommend checking out Danny Pena's Gamertag radio review when he talks about it. Also, Kate Sanchez over But Why Though. I'll leave links to their reviews when they go live down below, so that you can be able to know kind of the Latino perspective in regards to his character and his acting portrayal of this character. So I would definitely recommend checking those out. Now, as far as the gameplay, when it comes to sort of like the Far Cry series, the loop is you are a first-person shooter, and most times you are a faceless and nameless character. But in this game, you actually play as a character named Danny Rojas, and you basically are playing this particular character. You can choose between a male or female Danny Rojas at the beginning of the game, and you go through this character throughout the entire game, including seeing this character talk and interact in cutscenes. And it's not just in a first-person sort of perspective anymore. There is even certain aspects when you go into sort of the player camp or hub world. Essentially, you are in a third-person setting. I'm not too sure why that is the case with this, like why it's the shift in perspective perspective, but it's kind of interesting, and I haven't gotten that far into the game to see whether that is just for only those areas, or that plays a little bit later on. But for right now, it is kind of a bit jarring to kind of get in and out of that perspective, but hey, it's cool. Far Cry's expanding out. It's not just in first person anymore, so let's enjoy that. Now, as far as the other gameplay, pretty much if you played any previous Far Cry games, you're gonna like pretty much get the same exact thing in this, just a little bit more. You obviously have multiple different types of weapons, and you have multiple different types of vehicles you can be able to use, and everything kind of like all works together. But the difference is in this one is that you actually have some of these kind of very special weapons that they started to introduce in Far Cry New Dawn, were these custom weapons that get created in the world, such as a chainsaw, like a type gun, where basically you're shooting saw blades out at people. That was kind of cool in Far Cry New Dawn, but they kind of really work in the world of Yara in this, because these weapons are actually based on blueprints from old revolutions, and they're actually, it's basically kind of a hodgepodge of just stuff that's kind of like thrown together to make these really unique weapons. And also you have this thing called a Supremo, which is basically your backpack that basically like will do special abilities that will kind of clear out some enemies around you, or shoot rockets at people, or knock out electronics that are near you. Like there's a bunch of different sort of types of those Supremos that you can be able to unlock and sort of play around with and try as you go and throughout the game. But essentially what it breaks down to is that if you played a Far Cry game in the past, there is some things that are different in here, but it still has that kind of like Far Cry DNA. So if that's something that you were hoping to be able to could be completely changed in this, then I would say that this game may not be for you, but there is enough in here that I do feel like that it kind of basically matures the Far Cry series in a way, and does move it forward in where the possibilities can be endless with this type of franchise. So that being said, let's talk about the accessibility. Now, there is a lot here. When we kind of think about the amount of accessibility in 2021, we think about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, we think about even Halo Infinite, even though it's technically not out yet, but I also did take a look at the beta test flight, which I can be able to see this in the video here. But when it comes to sort of like a lot of accessible games this year, Far Cry definitely obviously stands out with just the amount of options that are in the game. Now, options don't always make an accessible game. You do have to be able to kind of have an accessible design from the very beginning in order to be able to make it really accessible. And I think that with Ubisoft and their sort of push for accessibility over the past few years, there is kind of like this hybrid of accessibility that is there. There's stuff that works and works extremely well, and then there's stuff that you can tell that you're trying to hold on to some legacy sort of game design that is starting to kind of conflict with the accessibility push that is internally within Ubisoft. Not to say that this game is inaccessible, I just think that there is definitely showing some wear and tear in sort of the current Ubisoft model when it comes to making large games. Because one of the things that Ubisoft has been doing over the past few years is basically like making their games really big, especially when it comes to their RPGs, such as like in Assassin's Creed or even The Division. There is a lot to do, and there's a lot of sort of systems upon subsystems of things you can be able to do, everything from driving to using a specific weapon to flying. Like there's a lot of sort of these systems that are trying to be able to come into play, and there's a lot of accessibility that can be able to help with that. But there are definitely some sort of conflicts that are one's trying to sort of overwork the other, and in some cases it can become just chaotic in regards to how you're able to get through a particular regards to a combat scenario or in regards to a mission. But when we dive deep into the accessibility settings, there's a lot here that I actually do enjoy. The fact that they included presets, which is something that obviously with the amount of accessibility options that are in Far Cry 6, the presets can definitely help. There are vision, cognitive, motor, motion, and hearing presets that you can enable and customize right before you even start the game. Also including a menu narrator that is enabled right from the very beginning of the game, which you can then customize before the game even starts. Although I will say, when you first turn on the game, it is still very jarring to be able to hear this.
Press cross button to start.
It's not a cross button, it's the X button. I'm sorry, I'm still gonna say this, it's the X button. The presets are definitely helpful and can be able to kind of at least get you into the game so that as you go through it, you can be able to start customizing as you find certain things that will work better for you. There is a no holds presses mode where actually will convert holds into presses instead, so that in the areas where you have to interact with the game, it'll ask you to do a double tap of a button instead of a hold. There are also no stick presses mode, where essentially you don't have to push down L3 or R3, which helps, especially when L3 is usually sprint. The way they actually fix that is that if you push forward on the left thumbstick, you'll just automatically sprint. Now, there are other accessibility options. They have a wide variety of subtitle options, which is really great. They have full captions for sound effects. Some of the NPC dialogue is not subtitled, but the majority of the story dialogue is definitely subtitled. There is also the ability to be able to change pretty much every sort of UI color that you can be able to think of and change it to whichever you like. Obviously, there is menu narration, and that does tie into the HUD as well. Not everything is narrated, but there are a majority of at least the information that you need, or the important information that you need, is narrated. There is also the ability to be able to remap every single control that you have in the game, whether you're on foot or in a vehicle or on a horse, which, by the way, there are horses in this game, which is really cool. You also can be able to turn off motion blur or camera shake. There's a lot of options that you've seen in a lot of different Ubisoft games that they've kind of really ported into Far Cry 6. Now, with the amount of options that are in the game, you would think, oh, this is extremely accessible. And I would say definitely yes, but also no. As I mentioned before, I think the gameplay is starting to kind of conflict with the amount of options that are there to be able to help disabled players. I think probably the best example I can sum up the conflict there is in regards to vehicles. Now, you can drive pretty much everything in the game, whether it's a car, a truck, a boat, a plane, a helicopter, or even a horse. And there are similar controls for every single vehicle you jump into. R2 is to accelerate, L2 is to deaccelerate, circle or B is always to brake, and left thumbstick is usually to steer. And that's the same for pretty much every vehicle other than jumping into a flying vehicle. But I feel like every time I jump into one, I feel like I'm having to relearn how to drive every single time, because each vehicle handles differently depending on which one you jump into. A lot of cars are usually too fast, some are too slow, some are hard to steer, some are easy to steer, and also some are just like hard to be able to see through the windows. And there's definitely options to be able to help kind of remap the controls to make it a little bit easier for you, or at least remove some barriers for you. And there's also the ability to be able to follow the road so that if you have a waypoint, the car or the vehicle can be able to drive itself to where you want to go. But there are times I just want to jump on a horse and just kind of ride off into Yara, and I feel like I can't do that, follow the road, so I'm having to be able to fight the controls that are there. I've crashed so much in a car that there were times I had to basically just abandon it and either walk to my destination or just grab a horse, because that was the closest thing I could find that was a little bit easier to be able to steer and to be able to handle the speed of the horse. That was just one example of several of the conflicts within the systems and subsystems that are in this game. Again, this is not to say that the game is completely inaccessible or broken. I applaud the accessibility team for working with the game that they have and trying to be able to make this as accessible as possible. And if I had to score this right now, if I was asked to recommend this game, I probably would score pretty high, just with the amount of options that are there to be able to kind of cover a lot of the gaps of disabilities, whether it's from vision, hearing, motor, or cognitive. But there are still some kind of conflicts there that if you fall into a very specific category of you need a very specific either option or part of or an accessibility as part of the gameplay, there might be some conflicts there, and it's going to take basically the accessibility is a little bit of a learning curve with this. And I think that kind of ties into pretty much a lot of Ubisoft's sort of MO at the moment, where they're trying to be able to create these vast worlds and these vast games that have so many options and really broadening the scope of what we think of as open world. But I think with the accessibility push that they have internally, that that is now starting to be able to push against each other. And we're starting to kind of see that, not necessarily the cracks, but just sort of the pressure that both the gameplay of what Ubisoft is trying to be able to create and the accessibility that they're trying to be able to improve upon for each game is now starting to kind of like butt up against each other. And again, it's not to say that Far Cry 6 is inaccessible. It is definitely the most accessible Far Cry game to date. It is one of the most accessible games that Ubisoft has in its library. But I can start to see that in the future, if Ubisoft kind of wants to go down this particular path of gameplay design, that full-blown accessibility, as we would love Ubisoft to do, is going to be difficult to accomplish. So would I recommend Far Cry 6 to you? Yes. I think you definitely should check it out, but I would also caution you that there is going to be a steep learning curve when trying to be able to play this game if you have a disability. That is it for me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to be able to see more of my videos, hit the subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. And hit the bell notification icon too, so you can be notified when new videos come out. That's it for me. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. As always, I remain obediently yours. Bye.